They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Well, I guess they've never really tried that hard to hide anything to begin with. Neo Vision Rain's Trustmaster reward, a Neo Power, is a materia that boosts the unit's limit burst damage by 30% and increases the unit's equipment attack by 75% if they're holding a single weapon. This is a massive boost, and so long as the developers still plan to release single-wielding units, it's not likely that this Trustmaster reward will lose its popularity anytime soon. His Super Trustmaster reward, Obliterating Crimson Sabre, is a two-handed greatsword that enables Power of the Sun, which increases the damage of fire attacks. While it may seem pretty selective, it is possible to simply imbue an ally with the fire element instead. Let's go over him in his standard form first. Blaze Saber is an extremely interesting Stardust Ray ability. Not only does it give Rain the fire element, but it also imbues one other ally as well. Helios Saber is a buff that increases your team's attack by a significant 230%, their fire resistance by an impressive 80%, and mitigates general damage by 40%. Rising Saber is a brave ability that chains of Stardust Ray. It provides a nifty side effect that increases your team's fire damage, so that's pretty useful. Astroedge is a more situational Stardust Ray brave ability that recovers Rain's HP and MP over time. Providence Sabre is Rain's equivalent to a Magnus ability. It has 2 uses per battle and has 2 parts to it. First, it's Rain's strongest Stardust Ray ability, and second, it boosts your entire team's attack by 280% for 5 turns. Let's move on to his cooldown abilities. Beastbreaker Plus is an ability that Rain probably swiped off of Ifrit when the two were stuck together. But Rain is able to turn that selfish buff into a team-wide buff, giving everyone in your team a physical and magical killer against beast monsters. Even if you aren't fighting a beast-type enemy, this ability still has a good amount of use, as it also increases your team's limit burst damage by 100%. Unfortunately, the cooldown time doesn't match up with the buff duration time, but I guess otherwise that'd be a bit too much. His next cooldown ability, King Saber, is the enemy buff removal effect that both Healing Avatar Lid and Seeker of Freedom Bond possess. Well, it's always nice to have another source of that effect, and this one chains anyways. It's also on a relatively short cooldown, but to counteract this, you can't use it until your 4th turn. Let's look at his passives. This one carries a Beast Killer, a small human killer, and 100% resistance against fire attacks. Onto his limit burst. Crimson Explosion is a powerful fire attack that gives your entire team the fire element for 2 turns. And that's it for his standard form. Rain's Brave Shift makes up for a glaring flaw in regular Rain's standard moveset, the lack of an Impero. But then he trades away any fire imbues. Ultimate Flame Blade is a Stardust Ray chaining attack that partially ignores the enemy's defense and lowers their fire resistance by 120%. Ash Blade is a brave ability that's effectively a powerful Stardust Ray attack. He trades out Prominence Sabre for Extreme Blade, which is just an even more powerful Stardust Ray attack. It's also a fire attack, so keep that in mind. Onto his cooldown abilities. Rising Fury fills up Rain's limit burst gauge and increases his limit burst damage. Everlasting Blade is another powerful Stardust Ray attack that recovers 150 MP with each use. That may look like it's a lot, but it really isn't, given the amount of MP Everlasting Blade already requires. Combine that with the fact that Rain is literally unable to double cast and you're just delaying the inevitable at best. Luckily, he still has Astroedge, so you can still rely on the gradual MP refresh if you need to. Let's look at his passives. This Rain's better suited to dealing damage with his limit burst, and leverages the Beast Killer into a human killer. He also prefers to hold a single weapon, though you might want to know that he loses his fire elemental resistance for whatever reason. Finally, his limit burst. Ultimate Nova is the limit burst chaining attack that Hyol first introduced. By itself, the damage modifier is notably lower than his standard form, but thanks to all his passive buffs and the fact that it also partially ignores the enemy's defense, it's effectively stronger than Crimson Explosion. Now let's make a damage rotation. As per usual, I'll be maximizing damage output. First off, use Prominence Sabre for the attack buff, Rising Sabre for the fire damage buff, and Blaze Sabre for the fire imbue. I wouldn't advise using Beastbreaker Plus here unless you're up against a beast-type enemy. First off, most damage dealers that rely on their limit burst tend to have their own way of boosting that damage to begin with. Second, Rain can increase his own limit burst damage in his Brave Shift form. Speaking of which, turn into Hyol. Then, use Ultimate Flame Blade, Ash Blade, and Rising Fury. On turn 3, use his limit burst. On turn 4, use Ultimate Flame Blade and Ash Blade once again, but top it off with Extreme Blade this time. On turn 5, we'll switch back to his regular form to apply his buffs again. Triple cast Rising Saber as it's his strongest active ability. On turn 6, cast Blaze Saber, Prominence Sabre, and Rising Saber, in that order. By this point, I'm pretty sure his limit burst is filled up by a good amount. On turn 7, dual cast Rising Saber and use Beast Breaker Plus for the limit burst damage buff. On turn 8, switch to Hyol and use his limit burst. What's that? Spending all of Rain's time in his other form made Rising Fury available again? Great! On turn 9, use Ultimate Flame Blade, Ash Blade, and Rising Fury. On turn 10, use his limit burst. From here on out, Rain's damage will begin to decrease, though not to an extreme extent. You can replace Prominence Sabre with Helio Sabre and Extreme Blade with Ash Blade. Keep his buff durations and cooldowns in mind to maximize his damage. So how good is Rain? In exchange for the fact that he can outdamage Cloud, he's probably a lot harder to use. Players will have to switch between his standard form and Brave Shift form to simultaneously take advantage of his imbues and imperils. Not only that, but Rain can't switch between forms back to back as he wishes, as he has a cooldown like Cloud. As such, you have to make sure that you tack on any additional effects before you change forms, so you can take advantage of them while you still can. Use Rain wisely and you'll find yourself with an extraordinary character. Even if another unit comes along and surpasses his damage output, the amount of support he provides to fire teams will no doubt make him a unit with a good amount of longevity. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Comment below if you plan to get Rain, or if you're saving up for someone else instead.